Here we are. Another episode, another podcast. And what are we talking about, Marcus?
All right, so we got a decent show today. Got a good lineup. We're going to talk about what's
I hope
going
it's
on
decent.
in the culture, maybe a little politics in there. Talk about what's going on in the church with Carl Lentz and that whole situation at Transformation. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then we're also going to talk about some commonly misapplied scriptures and hopefully just, I don't know, maybe learn some good hermeneutics for how we should be interpreting scripture and applying scripture
word.
to our lives. Yeah,
It's a funny word.
hermeneutics.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always feel a little snobby when I use it. I'm like
hermeneutics.
Yeah. So, all right, cool. So, first thing we're getting into. If you guys have been paying attention to the news at all, if you guys are into paying attention to politics like I am, I will sit there and watch C-SPAN for hours, if not CNN, which I know Aaron has a problem with me watching CNN.
Anybody should have a problem with
Yeah,
that.
well, at least I can call out when they're lying, so I'll take that.
You just need to watch Newsmax.
Yeah, that's the cure. No, but seriously, you guys should check out Breaking Points on YouTube. Phenomenal news channel. I trust them. I like it. So, but shameless plug. The debt ceiling. That's what's been going on recently. Apparently, Biden. Well, before I even get there, the country has been running up its debt, and apparently getting to the point where if we don't increase our debt ceiling of how much more we can go into debt, we would default on our debt and run out of money. Doesn't sound like a good position for a country to be in. So essentially, we thought we were going to come up against the clock here, run out of money. It would cause a lot of other catastrophic things to happen, things not to get paid. Social Security might not get paid out to those who are receiving Social Security, those that are retired, and things like that. And so it could have some actual effects on real people, real Americans. They did come to a deal tentatively. It still has to be agreed upon in Congress, so it's not across the finish line, but it's gotten to a.
Who's the they? Explain that.
Biden, president, and Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker of the House, Republican.
Mm-hmm.
Those two parties have come to an agreement, a tentative agreement on the budget and raising the debt ceiling, which will happen, and they'll revisit it in 2024 or 2025 or something like that. So that's what's been agreed upon between those two, but it has to go to Congress and get approved finally to go into place. So the conversation really around here, from our perspective, again, as we look to apply scripture to everything in our lives, and apply the gospel, contextualize it for our everyday lives, and as Americans, even with our government. The question is, and it's probably an obvious answer, but how should we be thinking about our country and its debt situation in relation to what we know is wise biblically, biblical wisdom in regard to our debt? What are you thinking?
I'm thinking Proverbs 22:7. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender.
Yeah.
And I don't have a great understanding of this situation that's going on with the country and the government and all, but so I have probably a very simple understanding of it from the perspective of that we're in debt.
Yeah.
And
we all understand that, right?
When you're in debt, you owe somebody.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like we've as a country we've owed places like China especially for a long time and a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
And there seems to be no out for that. At least with the way they want to currently have their current policies and what they want to push for the future, especially Democrats, like they would just keep digging that hole deeper. And
Yeah.
I don't understand that. I know obviously there's a billion different moving parts in this situation, but from a just general principle, it doesn't make sense to just keep digging that hole.
Yeah, at some point we got to go the other direction.
There has to be it has to stop at some point,
right.
or China or whoever else is literally just owns the country,
Yeah.
which you could probably make a pretty strong argument they already do.
Yeah.
So it's not good.
Yeah.
But then I come in, I'm thinking about the lay person, and I'm thinking about the guy that just hears this, the average Joe, and has the understanding of politics that like it's all dirty and he doesn't want to get involved. And he hears we're debating on raising the debt ceiling, when all he's ever heard recently is that inflation is skyrocketing because we just keep printing money.
Mm-hmm.
So I can imagine that somebody like that would ask the question of, why can't we just print more money and just keep, like, why does there have to be an end point to this? Just
Right.
keep printing more money and just keep going. Like, what does it matter?
Yeah.
I could see that, being a thought. So,
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, this thing has real implications. If you're retired, it's possible that if we defaulted on our debt, you don't get your payments, your Social Security payments. So this has real implications for people's pocketbooks, wallets, what's on their dinner table. And so, it's not this like mystical thing that we can't actually see in our everyday lives. Like, it could affect us. You mentioned that like Democrats, they just kind of want to keep pushing the debt limit up. And that has kind of been their stance, which is just like, well, duh, just raise it. Like, you're going to hold the country hostage. Well, duh, like we should just raise it and keep raising it. But I would say even for the conservatives, it's always been the public platform to say, we need to stop, we need to pay back our debt, we need to just go in the other direction.
But they're not actually doing
But they don't actually do it. And when they get in office, it still may not get raised as much as the Democrats, but it still gets raised. And it's like, okay, you're more conservative than them, but you're not actually being conservative financially and being fiscally responsible. And so we definitely have to hold both parties accountable. We have to hold our leadership accountable and start going in the right direction. Again, as Aaron mentioned, Proverbs 22, like, it's just wise. It's biblical wisdom to make sure that we're not doing that, because we talked about China, and most of our debt is indeed from China. And so you think of things like, even more recently, and I think it might have been more so with Middle Eastern countries, but decisions that we make around oil and other things, like wanting to be energy independent, and wanting to do our own oil here. We don't, because we're beholden to other countries and the help that we're giving them by buying from them, because we owe them. And so that's how it actually ends up hurting the rest of the country. And it's definitely not a good thing. And we can definitely use some biblical wisdom to make sure that we're not doing that. Not just personally, because obviously a lot of times we hear this verse, we apply it to ourselves and say, okay, we shouldn't be racking up credit card debt, which is true. We shouldn't be buying things we don't really need, especially for using debt to do that, because it's just bad financial practice. But we can also apply this as a nation, and then obviously as we go to the voting booth, have that in mind. So
yeah, I mean, the idea, on a personal level, and I think this is a good thing, it's that principle of, don't get it if you don't have the money for it.
Yeah.
Don't buy it if you don't have the money for it.
It's that simple.
Now, it is that simple, I would say, for most things. Now, where there is a little bit of nuance that comes in is like 99.99% of people are not going to be able to buy a house without going into debt.
Sure.
So, there is that.
Yeah.
A lot of people are not going to be able to get a car without going into some kind of debt.
Mm-hmm.
Go to college without going into some kind of debt. Now, all those things could be different,
Sure.
We could go into those things on different topics, because,
Yeah.
I'm definitely not the guy that's pushing college on people.
Sure. Yep.
I'm definitely not the guy that's pushing, going out to get a car that you have payments on, because I'm basically against all those things.
Yeah.
And a lot of it I'm against for the reason of not going into debt for it.
Mm-hmm.
And, because debt is crippling.
Mm-hmm.
And debt it's a weight on your shoulders that's always there until you're not in debt.
Yep.
It just is. And then, you talk about in terms like all the different dynamics of country versus country and all this kind of stuff. Debt is power. Mm-hmm. So the more debt that we are into another country, that country has more power over us.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so it's just generally not a good thing.
No. Yeah. Yeah. There's so many different directions you can go with why it's not good. And
Not, let me say this one last thing.
Yeah.
I do know that if probably not, but if there are any super rich people that ever hear this, obviously I there's different things, and I don't know exactly how all this works, but there are things in play where rich people can actually use debt to their advantage to get richer.
Yep.
But again, that's only like the 1% of the 1%.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
So, and you got to know how that works. You got to have people that can do that for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not just a you thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you got $1,000 and you go do it.
Right.
We're totally different ball game.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wouldn't even necessarily say I don't know. I don't know if I would agree that that's okay.
Yeah, even that's a discussion worth having too.
But for the person who's not the 1% of the 1%, which is like basically everybody, you need to stick to believing that is bad.
Yeah, because no matter what, there's a risk involved, even if you are, well off and wealthy. So last thing I'll say about that, it even prevents you from being a giver, right? Because if I'm in debt, I don't have that money freed up to be able to give to other people, and as God calls us to be open-handed and give, because I owe somebody else.
Yeah.
And so I don't have that money freed up to just give to whoever needs it right in front of me. And then even, again, expand that just from an individual level as a country, you have immigrants coming here that I just learned today, $7,000 each immigrant to take care of them a month. Each immigrant that's coming. Add that up. Think about the thousands upon thousands of immigrants that are coming to the country.
That's only if you want to believe that that's actually happening.
Yeah, there's people that will close their eyes to that, but let's assume and believe that's happening because it's a fact. But that's what it's costing. But we're doing that with money that we don't really have, and we're not even taking care of our veterans. There's veterans living on the street. And that's the extreme case, right? But there are Americans that just need health care or whatever, or need help, some type of welfare that we really can't truly even give to them because we're trying to give money that we don't actually have. And so there's just so many implications to this, and I won't belabor the point. But along with this, and I know you'll probably have thoughts on this, in that bill or in the kind of agreement, the debt ceiling agreement, one of the sticking points, and the last sticking point, my understanding, was that the conservatives or Republicans, Kevin McCarthy, wanted work requirements for things like welfare. And so if you were on welfare, you needed to be working. You couldn't just basically be sitting on your couch, not pursuing employment or anything like that. And I'll read this here. It says, as a part of the agreement, and he was able to get this, so it says, as a part of the agreement, so-called able-bodied adults, I think previously it was 50 years old, is now up to 54, 55, or younger, and do not have children, must work or participate in a training program for at least 80 hours a month to receive food stamps for extended periods of time. Otherwise, they can receive benefits for only 3 months over a 3-year period. So it's a little stricter. It's requiring people to actually be pursuing something in order to get certain benefits from the state, from the government. And so that's something that Kevin McCarthy was able to get into the bill. I would agree with it. I think most people across the aisles would agree with it. Most everyday people, I know probably Democrats that are in Congress wouldn't because of their voting bloc and their constituencies, and they feel like they need to do it just so they can get their vote, which is a shame. But anyway, I think most average Americans would agree people shouldn't just be mooching off of anybody, and that they should be actually putting a foot forward themselves and pursuing something, before asking for a handout. If you're asking to need help, I think most people are generally willing to help, willing to even pay more taxes to an extent, if they're not just simply sitting on their butt doing nothing and just receiving from other people. So what are your thoughts on that work requirement?
I'm just looking up a verse right now.
Yeah.
Because what you were just saying made one pop in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I have the right verse. But there's a Proverbs that says, paraphrasing, the man who doesn't work doesn't eat.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, it's not good policy I know there has to be some nuance in there because
Mhm.
there are circumstances where people literally can't work. Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
But again, that's not the majority.
Right.
That's not the general case.
Yep.
Um, so again, I think it's fairly simple that if you can do something, you should be. You should be working, and working for your food, working for your earning it, basically, if you want to
Mm-hmm.
say it that way. You should be earning it, because number one, that gets you off your lazy butt.
Mm-hmm.
That also helps you be a participant in the overall society.
Right.
um, and and because you think about it, if you break it down too this way, if more people who aren't actually participating in society
Mm-hmm.
keep sitting down and just receiving checks from the government, there has to be a point where that runs out.
Yeah.
It will.
Yeah.
And so you can't, you from a policy standpoint, from the government making policy, they can't keep encouraging that.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, that's just another thing that they would be doing that would be leading to the further demise of
Mm-hmm.
the society.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we're already seeing a whole lot of stuff like that. But I'm just saying, like, in general, what they were able to get in place, it sounds like from what you just read, that is at least a one small step towards the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what, that again made me think of that Proverbs that the idea is, like, if you can work, you should work.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that goes back to this could be another thing, but that goes back to the fall. That goes back to the curse of man.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Ever since the fall of Adam and Eve, part of the curse that was thrust upon us was, Eve was going to experience childbirth pain
Mm-hmm.
that was unbearable, and obviously women have ever since then.
Yep.
And men are going to have to work by the sweat of their brow the rest of
Mm-hmm.
their whole life.
Mm-hmm.
So it just is what it is. Like,
Yeah.
that's the world we live in.
Yeah.
And so if you can work, you should work.
Yep.
I think that's just basic principles.
Yeah. No, I agree. That's what it is. Cool. And it did say able body, so it, like to your point, it's not even asking everybody. Like it's reasonable. It's reasonable, like you said. Not everybody can work, but it's saying those who can should be doing something to aid and not just get pulled up by somebody else.
Yeah, and I mean, I know there's situations where that's not possible from
Right.
the person to be able to do that.
Sure.
That's why we see in the New Testament, we see circumstances of the church. It's the church's responsibility to take care of the widow.
Right. Right.
But it also does say take care of the widow of a certain age, because they expect that if they're younger than that they can be doing stuff on their own.
Mm-hmm.
But if they can't, or if they're old, it's the church's responsibility to take care of them, take care of them and their family.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think a lot of people tend to believe that when Scripture says that we should be helping the less fortunate, and I'm paraphrasing that, and because it says it in many different ways in many different places in the Scriptures. Again, just being generous in general, true. And I think a lot of people on the left, Christians, that so-called Christians on the left, would claim that, that's why welfare should be a thing. That's why we should be, giving people SNAP, and
they vote for that, is what you're saying.
Right, because they think that the principle is that we should be giving to these people that need. But when they say we, they're really talking about the government.
Yeah.
And the Scriptures are more so talking to the church and believers.
Mm-hmm.
And so first and foremost, it's not to say the government can't. I don't think there's anything wrong with that inherently.
I would say the government should, but as a last resort.
Right. First and foremost, it should be the church, and that's historically, you've seen that in a lot of ways, that the church has provided the first hospitals. The church has been the forefront of all of these things. Mm-hmm. The foster care system, orphanages, things like that. That's been the church that has been doing that general welfare for the community across this country, likely across the world. I'd even go on. I don't know that for a fact, but I did generally think that's probably the idea. So, I think that's first and foremost for the believer, and not so much the government. Although the government, as we just said, should, in a responsible way, don't just throw money we don't have, like we're currently kind of doing. But yeah, I think we're kind of aligned on that.
I mean, if you want to, we're not going to go down this rabbit hole either. But then you're also talking about in our country, in our situation, the government in terms of state government and federal government shouldn't be the federal government.
Yeah, that's fair too. It's a fair point.
But anyway,
yeah, that's a fair point.
All these different rabbit holes that could be their whole own conversation.
Absolutely. Cool. So speaking of that, obviously we're still sticking in politics for a little bit. Again, if you guys are paying attention, there are it's a whole full primary going on the right side of the aisle with the GOP, the Republicans. A lot of, I mean, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 candidates that have declared in the GOP primary, and I'll just mention this before we continue with the GOP. The Democrats do have 2 contenders against Biden that are declared in the race officially. The media and the Democrats, the DNC, Joe Biden, they are all trying to ignore those 2 candidates. Those 2 candidates are Marianne Williamson and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and they're actually polling better than Ron DeSantis is on the GOP side, but the media still wants to ignore them. But just so our audience knows, they are there and they are running strong against Biden. But for the GOP, what I wanted to kind of discuss is, historically, I'm black, if you can't tell. I grew up, yeah. Okay. I should have told you probably a long time ago. But, but growing up, you hear, and I just feel like it's like a rite of passage for black people, but you hear that the right side of the aisle, the conservatives, the Republicans, the GOP, they're racist. So you can't ever vote that way. Yeah. Aaron, So, that's been perpetuated by media, by the Democrats, but also even within our own community, that we don't even think deeply enough to kind of dispel that. But and it's not to say there aren't critiques or things of the conservative movement and Republicans that we shouldn't critique and look at and be like, hey, that's not cool. But again, it's kind of just been a broad blanket of like, they're racist, don't even consider it. But now we have them probably, I don't want to say the most because I don't know that for a fact, but we have a really diverse group of GOP candidates for president this time around.
I'll say, you just said very diverse group. It's really interesting because if you listen to like mostly liberal media, they would say the opposite. Oh, it's not diverse, which is so weird.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, Congress is still not as diverse as we'd probably like it to be. I think the conservative movement would like it to be. I think they're starting to acknowledge that they do a bad job of reaching out to people that haven't historically voted for them. It's almost been like they've just kind of given up on that, but that's turning around, I believe. But yeah, for this presidential group, this group of candidates, we definitely see diversity here. I mean, you've got 2 black men. You have Tim Scott, Larry Elder. You've got Vivek Ramaswamy of Indian descent.
Or whatever ethnicity you are. The famous Don Lemon quote.
Oh, he did say that. He did say that. Wow, that is terrible.
Don Lemon before he was fired, R.I.P.
That's terrible.
Good job, bro.
Yeah, R.I.P.
Nikki. Go ahead.
Nikki Haley's also of Indian descent.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Nikki Haley's also of Indian descent. So
is she Indian like Elizabeth Warren's Indian?
No, actually Indian, but like from India, not like Native American. So yeah, that's a whole other discussion. We're not going to go there. And then you've got some white fellas that have joined the race that are less known. I don't know who this one guy is actually. I probably should scroll down and figure that out. But Perry Johnson, Asa Hutchinson, Ron DeSantis, obviously, and then we got Donald Trump. And there's Mike Pence might join the race.
Who's Donald Trump? I never heard of him.
Yeah, okay. Who's this other guy? I'll let you know if I figure out who this other guy is. I don't know his. Oh, Ryan Binkley. I'd not heard his name until.
All the names you've heard already, it's going to be one of those names anyway. The other people.
Yeah, the other people coming in probably. I mean, there's Mike Pence, but we know his name. I'm not sure that he really has a chance. But anyway, we see the diversity changing of the GOP. I think in general, you see guys like even Byron Donalds moving up. I love the guy. You see him moving up kind of in the ranks. He almost, I won't say almost. I mean, his name got thrown around for House Speaker while the whole Kevin McCarthy thing was going on. They were debating.
That would have been dope.
I thought it would.
Because I want more young guys.
A new direction, younger
spots.
people for sure. Term limits would be great if we can get that in there. So that would have been awesome.
Number one.
But so anyway, we have this diverse group of Republican candidates. How is that going to play with the general narrative of the media that? And then before I even go there, you have the largest Republican black vote for a president went to Donald Trump in 2020.
Yeah,
that's a fact that people don't want to acknowledge. But what you see is the opposite of what most people would tell you, is that you have more diversity flocking to the Republican Party and conservatives, and it's heading in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that happening? Yeah, what do you think?
Well, I don't know how personal you want to get.
Yeah,
but
go for it.
I think what you have told me before.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you're black,
mm-hmm.
so you come from a black family history.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's kind of how that works.
Yep. That's how that works.
You've told me that in your experience around your family and other families growing up and all that whether they realize it or not, that generally speaking, black families are conservative.
100%.
Even if you're not Christian.
Yeah.
Like you live
100%.
in a conservative way.
Yep.
But then they always vote. Always vote Democrat.
Yep.
And basically has been that since the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And
mm-hmm.
so I think what is happening very slowly is that people are starting to catch on to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so why does it mean, like, personal? Like, I remember you continuously tell me stories about your parents
mm-hmm.
and how you're like slowly introducing things to them,
mm-hmm.
and it's that light bulb is slowly turning on for them.
Sure. Yep.
Because they've lived and been conservative,
yep.
but have basically always voted Democrat.
Yeah.
So in other words, it's like your voting patterns don't match up with how
your
you
values
actually think
your principles.
and live your life.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I believe, and I do hope, honestly, that more minorities are realizing that, and actually, and I think part of the realization is how bad they're seeing Biden and other Democrats perform.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
yep.
so because they might not even have it might not have clicked at all for them. Like, oh, I live conservatively, but I always vote Democrat.
Right.
That might not have clicked.
Right.
But what they are seeing in real time in front of them
mm-hmm.
is the failure of a president that Biden is.
Yeah.
And Kamala Harris and all those people. And so hopefully through that failure, their eyes are being opened to at least seeing what else is out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and that's what makes it really interesting too. From a Democrat side, Robert Kennedy,
mm-hmm.
because he's out here, again, a Democrat running, and he's out here saying things that Democrats haven't said for forever.
Mm-hmm.
As long as I can remember. He's all about, no censorship. He's all about First Amendment. He's all about freedom. He's all about all these things that you would think he's like running alongside Trump.
Right.
Now I'm sure when it gets down to the nitty gritty of his policies, there's definitely going to be things that, he aligns with Democrats on, obviously, because mm-hmm. he's a Democrat.
Sure.
But that gives me a little bit of hope too, though, that somebody of that caliber, because he's already polling at 20% mm-hmm. as of a CNN poll I'm looking at right now from May 25th. Mm. He was at 20%, which at this point in the game, with the little campaigning he's done, is really high.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think that him and what he's about and what he says he's about, you might see that that the Democrat establishment might start realizing that the people, us,
mm-hmm.
we're not for what they're for.
Right.
And whether that's a Robert Kennedy or whether that's you're going all the way to like a Trump or DeSantis.
Mm-hmm.
But the people are not for what Biden's pushing.
Right.
The people are not for what, come out, whatever Harris is bumbling about. And
The word salads.
she's a master at that. I'll give her that. And, they're just not. The people are just not about it. Lowest approval ratings basically ever for a VP and for a president at this stage in the game.
Yeah.
And, that's the people telling you something.
Yeah.
So what are they telling you? But now it always comes back to, will they follow through with their actual vote?
Yeah.
So
yeah, we'll see. I do think that, I don't know if it's been third-party influencers or what. I don't know what it is, but you even saw people like Tulsi Gabbard. And now she's since left the Democratic Party. I think she considers herself independent now. But again, those voices that aren't falling in line, I think you're seeing them get a little bit, I think they're getting louder. I think they're getting more accepted than people thought they would be.
Yeah.
And so why you even get a Donald Trump. Like, I think you're starting to see that people outside of what they want people to fall into are in some ways, and I say this in a good way, are hijacking the vehicles to get there, meaning the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. And they're using the establishment to get themselves where they want to get. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump used the Republican Party, even though he doesn't sound like a traditional Republican all the time. And he used that vehicle to win the presidency. You see, I think RFK trying to do that same thing. Again, he's a politician, but very different from what the DNC wants to hear from him.
Yeah.
Marianne Williamson, same thing. Probably not as large of a following, but you get what I'm saying.
And like my guy, my favorite in the race is Vivek Ramaswamy.
Love the guy.
And he's definitely not, traditional Republican, down the line. He's not, but like you just said, he's using running as a Republican to get to where he is trying to get.
Right.
And because a lot of his policies probably fall more in line with like libertarian. Mm-hmm. But then he's well, I don't know. I'm not really gonna get on a tangent about Vivek because he's probably my favorite policy wise. He's probably my favorite politician that I've seen run since I've been following politics. Mm-hmm. For the last, 5-6 years.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that.
And
he has so much content. Like he's talked about this before, but that, a lot of times, I don't know if you guys notice, but like a lot of times politicians will try to not say things just so they don't get the blowback of saying what they really feel. Yeah. Vivek is like, here's my policies, here's how I feel about it, here's what I'm going to do about it. Yeah. I don't care if you guys like it or not. If you don't want to vote for me, then don't vote for me. You have that right. You have that freedom to not vote for me. But here's where I stand on everything, and you're going to know where I stand on everything. And that's so refreshing. Yeah. And it's just all that content's out there. You can literally go find what he stands on basically anything by just going to his podcast, his website, his Instagram, whatever.
Yeah, he doesn't apologize for it. No. And, I mean, he's written books, his podcast, The Vivek Show. Mm-hmm. I think that he's running it right. He's doing the campaigning right. He's out there traveling on a bus, going to spots all over. But he also is doing a podcast a couple times a week where you can clearly – he clearly lays out his position in detail on all these different topics and brings on experts in the field about different topics and has a conversation with them. And the thing with him is he's the youngest. Mm-hmm. He's 37, so he's fresh, which is that in itself is refreshing to see from a political candidate. He's fresh. He's not a career politician. He's a very successful entrepreneur coming in, just like Trump was, but he has a constitutional law background, so he knows that side of things.
I didn't even know that.
Fact check me on that because I might be a little wrong, but I believe I did hear him say that. Okay. And I just really like him for all the reasons that Marcus said. He's very clear. He's very specific. He speaks his mind, which we have gotten a lot, with recent years with Trump and other people like DeSantis and stuff. But he speaks his mind, but not at all in the way of being a jerk. Like he never shuts down conversation with somebody that disagrees with him. Yeah. And but he also doesn't hold back his positioning either.
Right.
So I just say this last note on him.
Mm-hmm.
He's the main reason why I can't wait for the debates,
Mm-hmm.
because the debate stage is where he's going to shine.
Oh, absolutely. I can tell. Yeah.
And I along with what he's building up to this point in terms of more and more people becoming aware of who he is on the debate stage, I hope that a lot more people start following him.
Yeah. Hopefully that puts him in front of some faces and people are like, oh,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah, he speaks with such clarity. Like, you can tell he's a smart guy. Like, he's really smart. But, like, a lot of times you watch these politicians and they're just above your head, like, with some of the things they're saying. Somehow, you can tell he's smart. He knows what he's talking about.
He knows how to dumb it down.
But he knows how to dumb it down and not make himself look dumb.
But not in a condescending way either.
No,
Yeah.
not at all. Not at all. And then lastly, I mean, Tim Scott is one of my faves. I still feel like Vivek's kind of my front runner right now for personally who I'd vote for in the primary, I think. But Tim Scott, you can't not love the guy. Like, he's just got that personality. He's definitely a man of faith. He's made that clear in his first few interviews and announcements. And he's definitely one of those guys where, you know, because it's taboo in the conservative Republican movement to be Christian.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just Christian in name only. And so
probably most of the time.
And so, you know, you fall in line with the Judeo-Christian values. But this is definitely seems to be a guy who lives that life. Like, he's about that life, unashamed believer. And so that's definitely kind of the foundation of his campaign this time around. So,
and I would say, like, actual believer.
Yeah.
Not like the guy who just ran for Georgia.
No, I think for his best,
that preacher guy.
There's that.
I forget his name.
Raphael Warnock. Yeah. But anyway,
he's a joke.
Yeah. So, yeah, but I mean, and I think for the best we can see, there seems to be fruit with this guy, like with Tim Scott. You know, obviously we're not friends with this guy. We don't know him personally, but
we don't know any of these people personally.
Yeah, we don't. You know, maybe, hey, you guys want to come on the show? But you know what I'm saying. But this guy seems to be a man of faith and conviction, and like seems to be serious about it. So there's always that.